Can you hear me? Jerry Reynolds.
Yes, sir.
Hey, Terry.
Hi, this is Jerry.
Jackson, we're all set in the room.
Wonderful. With that, we'll go ahead and call the February 17th, 2021 APC public hearing to order. First item on the agenda is the roll call. Eric, if you would, please.
Absolutely. Please signify your presence when I call your name. Jackson Bogan.
Present.
Larry Leverins.
Here.
Roland Winger.
Here.
Gary Schroeder.
Present.
Jerry Reynolds.
Present.
Greg Jones.
Present.
Jake Gray. Jake Gray. Diana Looper. Diana Looper. Vicky Pearl.
Present.
Michelle Dennis.
Present.
Tom Murtaugh.
Present.
Perry Brown.
Present.
Tracy Brown.
Present.
Jason Domkowski.
Present from the Atlanta airport. My apologies.
Lisa Dullum. Lisa Dullum.
Here.
Kathy Parker.
Present.
Carla Snodgrass.
Present.
Eric,
Quorum present. And if I could remind everyone to mute your microphone unless you are speaking, it would be helpful.
Eric,
Thank you.
Lisa Dullum is here, and Diana Looper is here.
Okay.
Acknowledge. Diana and Lisa are here.
Can you hear me?
I've got Lisa
I'm
now.
here.
And
You
I
can
got
hear me?
Diana. Good.
Okay, you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Gotcha.
We're all good. With that, we're going to take a minute, if we would. We're very excited to introduce our new incoming executive director, Mr. David Hiddle. Mr. Hiddle comes to us was the current director, Department of Planning and Zoning for Johnson County from 2013 to present. Prior to that, he spent some time as the senior planner for the Department of Metropolitan Development for the city of Indianapolis. We are very excited. We're going to have a little bit of an overlap for a little while with Sally staying on. Thank you very much, Sally. And with that, Mr. Hiddle, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm equally, if not more so, excited to be here and joining you for the first time. And I'm looking forward to starting on March 1st. Very eager to meet the staff and neighborhood leadership and the Plan Commission, the development community, and get started. And I also want to offer a very solid thanks to the Plan Commission and whoever masterminded this 1 month transition overlap period with Sally. We just had a longtime engineer leave our department after 24 years, and we had a similar overlap period with an incoming engineer, and that was a godsend. It was so incredibly helpful. So I'm going to do my best to soak in as much institutional knowledge as Sally is able to give me. And that's really, I don't think that happens very often. So whoever amongst you and all of you, thank you so much for arranging for that. It's a wonderful thing.
Well, thank you for joining us tonight. I think all of us would like to take credit, but I think that credit really goes to Sally, and would like to thank her for staying on as well throughout this transition. While we will all miss her dearly, we are excited to have you aboard and part of the team. So thank you very much. And you can watch all of us virtually clap for you as we wait. So there we go from there. So thank you and look forward to seeing you in person again.
Thank you.
Sally, on to the briefing session.
Yeah, it's simple tonight. All the cases are ready to be heard and the paperwork has been filed.
Thank you. On to the approval of the minutes.
I move to approve the minutes from the January 20th, 2021 meeting as submitted.
I think somebody's
second
muted.
that.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? That carries. New business.
I move to hear and approve resolution PD 2102.
I second.
And Ryan, I believe you're presenting on this one.
Yes. All right. Well, we have sort of the second installment for the Westminster Village Cottages plan development. This would be phase 1, part 2. If you recall, phase 1, part 1 was recorded last year, which got them started with, I believe, 5 new cottage buildings for single-family residential type use as part of the larger Westminster project. Westminster, as you can see here, is broken up between an MR zoned area and then the planned development portion.
Hey, Ryan.
Yep.
Are we supposed to be seeing something on the screen?
Well, usually we have at least the opening map. I just saw it for a second there and then it disappeared on me.
I think Kathy stopped sharing her screen.
There it is. Can you see that now, sir?
Now we can. Thank you.
All right. Okay. So in any event, this is the site. The areas with all the little cul-de-sacs and loop roads is the kind of the single family detached portion. Though these are all private streets and these are all rental environments for the residents of Westminster. This second part of phase 1 will introduce another 6 cottage homes. They're sort of doing a targeted demolition and reconstruction of these buildings. And this plan development is pretty unique. It has a lot of flexibility built into it, but this first installments of 17 cottages and then a second phase with an additional 12 is really their first offering. But the PD itself really is sort of set for life. They have an ability to do a lot of different things in the future should the market demand it. So we're taking baby steps, and this is part 2. So final detailed plans consist of construction plans and an amended final plat for addressing purposes. And they meet the requirements at this stage of the development. Bonding is not being requested per the city and Indian American Water. So staff is recommending approval of resolution PD 2102. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ryan. Do we have any questions from the commission members? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and give that a minute pause for comments on social media. And I have that timer started.
All right. Incidentally, both YouTube and Facebook are operating normally.
Thank you. And while we wait on this, just a reminder that the link for this came from Diane on Tuesday, February 16th at 1:02 p.m. And we will be voting on resolution PD 2102. All right, Ryan, do we have anything?
No comment on this item.
Okay, Eric, if you would, please call for the vote.
When I call your name, please signify your vote by saying approve or deny. Jackson Bogan,
Approve.
Larry Leverins,
Approve.
Roland Winger,
Approve.
Gary Schroeder,
Approve.
Jerry Reynolds,
Approved.
Greg Jones,
Approve.
Diana Looper,
Approve.
Vicky Pearl,
Approve.
Michelle Dennis,
Approve.
Perry Brown,
Approve.
Tracy Brown,
Approve.
Jason Domkowski,
Approve.
Lisa Dullum,
Approve.
Kathy Parker,
Approve.
unanimous vote in favor of approval.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. Don, if you'd let us know when those votes are in, please.
Will do.
I think we're supposed to have 15, is that right?
I believe it should be 16.
Okay, well,
Don, we'll go ahead and leave that open, and if you wouldn't mind messaging the person directly, if
Yeah.
who may or may not have forgotten to submit
yeah,
that. But we'll go ahead and,
we do have 15 positive, approval responses so far, but I'll leave it open.
great, thank you. I don't want to keep people up from their favorite part of the public hearing, which is next, whereby they get to listen to me read a statement in regards to the procedures of the meeting. So we'll move to that. For those of you unfamiliar with our procedures.
Jackson,
Yes,
Jackson,
sir.
I can't bring my vote up on my phone. I'm sorry.
Thank you,
Tried to
Jerry.
bring the vote.
We can fix those details a little later, but we have your vote on record, Mr. Burns. If that's correct, we're okay to proceed.
We are okay to proceed. Thank you.
Thank you. For those of you
Thank
unfamiliar
you.
with our procedures, the commission would like you to know the following. When we hear a request to subdivide land, we are only concerned as to whether the actual drawing showing the division into lots meets the technical requirements of our ordinance. The question of appropriateness has already been determined. Anyone wishing to make comments or provide us with the information regarding any subdivision petitions will be given the opportunity to do so. When we are hearing a request for a change in zoning, we are trying to determine if the new zone being requested and the uses allowed in that zone are appropriate to that property and supported by the comprehensive plan. With each case being heard, our staff will present its report. Then the person requesting the rezone will be given an opportunity to speak. Following that, those of you wishing to speak in favor of the rezone will be recognized, and then those of you who oppose it will have a turn. This will be your only time to speak. The person requesting the action will be allowed a rebuttal. Plan commission members will then ask questions and finally vote. Please limit your statements to no more than 5 minutes. We ask that you not repeat what others before you have already said. We are a 17-member body, and a majority of 17 is 9. Regardless of how many commissioners are actually present, at least 9 votes in favor or 9 votes against are required for our action to be official. If fewer than 9 of us agree to either approve or disapprove an action, that case must be heard again next month. Our vote on our request to subdivide is final. Our vote on a request to rezone serves as a recommendation to the appropriate city council, town council, or county commissioners, who must ultimately decide on changes in zoning. When addressing the commission, please state your name and address for the record. Cell phones and your mic must be muted. If you need to make a call, please mute it and step away. All exhibits presented to the commission become the property of the commission. Gary?
I move that there be incorporated into the public hearing portion of each application to be heard this evening and to become part of the evidence at such hearing, the Unified Zoning Ordinance, the Unified Subdivision Ordinance, the Comprehensive Plan, the bylaws of the Area Plan Commission, the application and documents filed therewith, the staff report and recommendations on the applications to be heard this evening, and responses from checkpoint agencies.
I second.
Motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
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 I'm only getting part.
Opposed? That carries. Rezoning activities.
I move to hear and approve Z 2813 Century Real Estate Holdings LLC, A to G.
I second.
Kathy?
This request was heard last month as a 13-acre rezone request. It was continued by petitioner to add a commitment limiting the use, but that didn't happen. Instead, the original 13-acre request of these 3 tracts has been shrunk to 3.3 acres. It's actually one entire tract plus portions of these 2 larger tracts. So they're going to be doing an exemption E deed transfer to create this configuration. And it will be a 3.3 acre tract, and that is the area they are requesting to rezone. So as you can see, the property is zoned agricultural, as is all the property out there in the area. There are 2 commercial zoning nodes, NB and GB zoning at 500 and 231, and also at 400 West and US 231. Here's a look at the aerial photograph and a closer look at the property. So the only reason this is a GB rezone and not a special exception at the Board of Zoning Appeals is a footnote in the permitted use table. There's a footnote that limits the building size to 5,000 square feet. Petitioner's proposing a 7,200 square foot building. So staff and the administrative officers met a couple of weeks ago, and one of the items we discussed was this footnote. It was pretty much decided that we should amend that footnote to allow a building up to 10,000 square feet. So this will be discussed at the March Ordinance Committee meeting and debated, but the soonest it could be put into law would be May. So instead of requiring petitioner to wait a couple of months, we can go ahead with this GB that's smaller than the original request. Staff still prefers business zoning to be located at the intersections, at the nodes. We also prefer they be on sewer. We have heard from the health department, and this has an existing commercial septic on site that can adequately serve the proposed use on the revised 3.3 acre tract. We also have a letter from American Suburban Utilities saying that they could serve this with sewer. It would have to be extended. So the use that's proposed is clearly innocuous, and 3 acres is more supportable to staff than the original 13 acres, and we are recommending approval.
Thank you, Kathy. Petitioner or petitioner's representative wishing to speak on this matter?
Yes, thank you. Kevin Riley, attorney with Riley and Teeter and Schreier, representing the petitioner. We agree with the staff's recommendation of approval and wanted to thank staff for their willingness to work with us towards this proposed resolution. As Kathy mentioned, we will use and to clarify from a previous statements last meeting, The plan is to use the existing septic system and well on the property. And we, as far as we know, there have been no objections from the neighbors, so we respectfully request your approval. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. David Hedden, who is with Century, is also in the meeting to answer questions if you have them.
Thank you, Mr. Riley. Do we have any questions from the commission members? I as well would like to thank staff and petitioner for working on getting this one worked out. Greatly appreciate that, Mr. Riley, for all your efforts in that as well. With that, we'll not hearing any questions from the commission members. We'll go ahead and take that 1 minute pause for social media. I've got the clock started now. A reminder, we need to pull up a ballot. This is the 2813 Century Real Estate Holding LLC, Z2813. Ryan, do we have anything?
No comment on this item.
Okay, Mr. Burns, if you would, please.
When I call your name, please signify your vote for the rezone by saying approve or deny. Jackson Bogan,
Approve.
Larry Leverins,
Approve.
Roland Winger,
Approve.
Gary Schroeder,
Approve.
Jerry Reynolds,
Approved.
Greg Jones,
Approve.
Diana Looper,
Approve.
Vicky Pearl,
Approved.
Michelle Dennis,
Approve.
Tom Murtaugh,
Approve.
Harry Brown,
Approve.
Tracy Brown,
Approve.
Jason Dumpkowski,
Approved.
Lisa Dullum,
Approve.
Kathy Parker,
Approve.
Carla Snodgrass,
Approve.
unanimous vote of approval.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. Everybody, don't forget to get those ballots into Don. If you'd let me know, please.
Will do. I'll say so far we have 13 positive responses. I'll leave this in the open as well.
Thank you very much. Remember to get those ballots in. Looks like we have 3 more, maybe with the exception of Mr. Reynolds, as his was not working properly. We'll go ahead and move to Z2820 Trinitas Development LLC.
I move to hear and approve Z2820 Trinitas Development LLC, R1 to R1 and R3 with commitments.
I second.
All right, on this one, Mr. Burns, if you would please, because I know there has been many letters that we have received and read, and we've been kept up to date on that. Would you mind go ahead and giving us a brief summary as to what takes place with those?
Absolutely. As the commissioners are aware, we have a bylaw that provides that if a person wants to submit a meeting by the appropriate deadline, they may do so. Submit a letter by the appropriate deadline. They may do so as long as they are signed and in compliance with the bylaws. And in the usual case, it's easy enough to read those into the record as is customary in front of this body. It became apparent very early to the attorneys involved, Dan Teeter and Mike Andrioli, who I'm sure you'll hear from later, that there was going to be a great volume of letters. And if we were going to read each one of those into the record, it would take an inordinate, an unreasonable amount of time. And so in conversation and after discussion with staff, it was determined by the attorneys involved, myself, and the staff that it would be appropriate that in lieu of reading letters into the record, that these letters would be made available. They were made available in two different packets. One packet, I believe, was yesterday afternoon, late or evening, early last night, and another packet today. Because of the large volume, we believe that this is in keeping with the bylaws. It does not necessitate any change from the bylaws because we have agreement of council, staff, and your attorney, myself. And so you've had the opportunity to see those. There's more than 100, both for and against. Those have been made available on the website and in links sent to the individual commissioners. The only other thing of note would be that there have been some letters that were received that were not in compliance because they are not signed. Those were not linked. Those are not part of the record, and they are merely noted for informational purposes that they were received. If you have any questions about the procedure, please let me know. But otherwise, we believe that in keeping with the bylaws to be as transparent as possible and also to be fair and to not unduly take up time of the commission and the public, that this was a good compromise within the spirit and intent of the bylaws.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. Greatly appreciate that explanation. Ryan, if you would present, please.
Okay. Well, we have a site here on the western edge of the West Lafayette city limits, just outside the city limits in the unincorporated county. A site consisting of 40.32 acres being proposed to be rezoned from R1 to R3 with a commitment, and approximately 18.5 acres to be rezoned from R1 to R1 with a commitment. The proposed use is a multifamily apartment development. The frontage for the road is State Road 26 West, just west of the US 52-231 intersection with 26 here in Wabash Township. Subject property has been zoned residentially for a long time, and as you can see, is used in portions of it there for row crop production. The wooded areas are there's as you can see, there's some floodplain there to the west, some floodplain zoning. Those wooded areas are lower areas that may not necessarily have floodplain in them by definition, but you know, water does pond there potentially. The zoning pattern, as you can see from that zoning map, we have quite a mix of different residential zones and agriculture zones that are either used residentially or for agricultural production. We also have some residential plan development zoning that is either duplex or single family. The closest to it would be the orchard, which is due west, and there are sort of two halves to the orchard. One is zoned R1, and then the other is zoned by a couple different plan developments of the single family variety. We can go ahead into the next slide, please. Okay. And the terms of adjacencies, we did have that OR zone piece to the southeast. That's currently under development for office use, but everything else is residentially zoned. Apart from the subdivisions to the west, the Orchard being the nearest, we do have some single-family home sites right immediate along this frontage with the shared with the subject property. Some single-family homes that are not part of a subdivision. You can see them there in the southwest corner of the site. The terms of traffic transportation, State Road 26 is a primary arterial. If the rezone is accomplished and then subdivided, right of way will be required to be dedicated. The required 60-foot half-width right of way for this primary arterial. NDOT, of course, will be the reviewing agency. This is a state road, and so driveway permits, curb cut permits, et cetera, are required to be obtained from NDOT to accomplish access into this site. Petitioner has submitted a traffic impact analysis to NDOT in advance of this rezone petition. I think just to identify any traffic-related issues that they might need to factor into their site plan. NDOT's confirmed they have received that and are reviewing it. In terms of public utilities, as you can see, this site is undeveloped, but public utilities are all over the place surrounding this site, and all of the applicable entities have indicated they are able to serve this by extending services to this site, and so they are well within the range to be able to tap in and have those facilities extended. Okay, I think you can go to the next slide. All right, the petitioner submitted two commitments for two halves of the site, one for the R1 portion and one for the proposed R3 portion. I'm not going to read them verbatim, but essentially, because they're in the staff report, but the R1 portion is the real estate 1 section that's referred to in the staff report, and there are two commitments there, one concerning limitation of uses, and the other concerning a setback requirement. For real estate 2, that's the proposed R3 area. They also have a setback commitment that they are proposing. That green hatched area there to the west and southwest, they're proposing a 100-foot setback there for a kind of a tree buffer preservation area. And then, let's see, and then they also are proposing a, along the entire north side, a further tree preservation area, as well as that western portion. A third commitment concerning light pollution was also included, committing to the use of certain fixtures that will reduce spillover light pollution to adjacent properties. Okay. You can go ahead and just leave that slide up. We'll just work from that. In terms of our comments, as again, I'll be brief, but in areas of the county or cities for that matter, that where we have not had a restudy since sanitary sewer became more available. In this case, we're in the unincorporated county. Staff relies on development patterns that have been going over the years, as well as the closest studied areas that are within proximity to a subject property up for rezoning. Those two guides, development history and then nearby studied areas will sort of inform us in terms of what's appropriate for future land uses in an area that should be restudied. In this instance, the development patterns are quite obvious. I kind of explained them in terms of the largely single-family residential zoning and development that has occurred in the developed portions surrounding this subject property. In terms of studied areas, the US 231 corridor plan, which was adopted just a couple of years ago, and its subsequent corridor rezone are the studied elements that we're bringing to bear in terms of our opinion. The US 231 corridor plan took place only within the city limits of West Lafayette. It did not go past them. And since the KBNS Railroad, which is along the east boundary of the subject property, is also the city limits, this corridor plan's studied area is immediately adjacent to the east. And so staff felt this is perfectly appropriate to sort of cite what that plan says and how it rezoned itself post-plan adoption to inform how we should probably proceed here. And the land use category for the future land use plan of that document, this area immediately to the east across the railroad tracks, was designated in its future land use map as low density residential. And I include a definition quoted from the plan there, but in short, it recommends single family development and other lower impact uses such as churches, parks, etc., schools, consistent with the development standards of the R1, R1A, and R1B zones, unless planned development zoning is utilized. Planned development zoning, of course, allows for quite a variety and a relaxation of development standards as it's specific to that PD zone. So, so we have this studied area immediately adjacent. And after the plan was adopted, we did a corridor-wide rezone, as many of the commissioners here know. And R1B zoning was brought to this area to be consistent with the recommendations of that plan. So you can see R1B zoning is directly east to conform with the policy requirements of the plan. So ultimately, these two factors, the development patterns surrounding the site and this studied area, both point to a situation where multifamily development is just incompatible. It's incompatible from a policy perspective with regards to this neighboring study, and it's also out of character with what has been developed in the immediate vicinity. And so for those two reasons, staff is recommending denial of the rezone petition and its associated commitments. Relative to the commitments, this is also included in page 4 of the report. I wanted to sort of speak to them briefly. Relative to the R1 commitments for real estate 1, it's staff's opinion they don't have much utility. Limiting the uses, R1 is a very restricted zone on its own. It allows single-family detached residential homes and then certain very low impact non-residential uses that are in keeping with a single-family neighborhood, like churches, schools, libraries, those sorts of things, public parks. So they're essentially restricting the use of that property only to the single-family detached home use. In terms of the R3, staff has no issues with the commitments there, with the exception of the light pollution one. In our opinion, it should be tightened up and provide a level of something for the administrative officer of Tippecanoe County, the building commissioner, to measure against. And this is sort of an unmeasurable commitment as written. So staff is recommending that the commitment, if the petition were to be approved with the commitments, that the commitment be modified to reflect the International Dark Sky Association's fixture seal of approval, which is a measurable standard and has a host of fixtures that meet that seal. That's something the AO can easily judge against. And so we just recommend adding that language into that commitment if the petitioner consents to that. So that stated, if the petitioner decides to amend their commitment, that would trigger a continuance upon their request of one to the next hearing in order to amend that commitment and advertise it accordingly. So that's just a little note there. So I believe that's it in terms of my analysis. Be happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, again, staff is recommending denial of the petition and commitments.
Thank you, Ryan. One point of clarification. So if the petitioner did amend the commitment, your position would still, or staff's position would still, recommendation would still be denial. Is that correct?
That's correct. As we have our little asterisk there at the end of the report, you know, if the petition and commitments are approved, you know, then, you know, we just recommend, well, prior to approval, we would recommend that if there's support for the petition and potentially its commitments with this augmentation of adding the dark sky business, then staff would recommend that the petitioner use one of their continuances to make that happen.
Okay.
So, but that said, as I say in my final paragraph, even with amendments to the commitments, you know, there's still this burden of proving that the proposed use is appropriate given development patterns and given an immediately adjacent studied area. And the simple fact is, it's the proposed use, multifamily apartments, is what's incompatible, not necessarily light fixtures. So
okay.
Staff would just say that if commission disagrees with staff's opinion on the proposed use, that this commitment concerning light pollution be tightened up by having that seal of approval language included. Does that make sense?
It does. And thank you for that clarification. Petitioner's representative wishing to speak on this?
Thank you, sir. Before I start, can you turn the screen over to Jeff, Ryan, so he can proceed with it?
Yeah, I believe we're ready for your slideshow. Do you want to go ahead and begin?
Yes, Jeff, if you'll start with that.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Is it possible for me to share my screen, Ryan, as opposed to you sharing yours, or?
It's probably simpler to just ask for an advance on the slide.
Okay, note to my team on that. Thank you.
So Jeff, you're ready to put the items up there for us? Okay. For the record, Dan Teeter, attorney with Riley, Teeter and Schreier. I represent the petitioners. With me tonight are petitioners' representatives, Linda Irving, Jeff Knable, Chris King, and they'll speak after my presentation is over. I wanted to start by saying I want to make you aware that we have submitted to the area plan approximately 130 emails and letters. We've done the same to the county commissioners. Those were all favorable for our rezone and for our commitment. Some of those letters, or many of those letters, are not in your packet. The reason being that those do not meet the requirements of APC on their bylaws. I also want to thank Eric Burns for all his hard work that he did to make this meeting more time efficient. And he did that while he was on medical leave. So Eric, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Start with, I think the question for this rezone is not whether we want rental homes or students, because both are allowed in R1, and with the proximity to Purdue, they're going to be there. I think the real question becomes for this commission and for the county commissioners later on, perhaps, is that, pardon? I'm sorry, did I miss something there? Thought someone said something. The question is whether the commission prefers our development with the commitments that we've provided for setbacks, tree preservation, green space, lighting, or whether they prefer a development that has none of these protections with it. We've also met with the neighbors, which we've always tried to do. We did that on 2 occasions here. We would have liked to have done more, but that didn't seem to work. I would state that the meeting, we were very open and transparent with what we wanted to do and perform. They asked a lot of questions. There's a lot of dialogue back and forth. No resolution was reached in that regard. We also stated that we would be willing to make our commitments more restrictive, but we didn't get a comment back from them with regard to that either. For the record, I do disagree with staff's report and staff's conclusion. Since the comprehensive plan does not and hasn't been updated to consider this area, yes, staff relied on the 231 corridor plan, but it doesn't include our property. So I disagree with that. I also question when they say that we excluded churches and parks. Parks, the county doesn't even want to maintain, so I don't even think that's relevant to where we are this evening. I think what we need to talk about is what do we have to rely on that's near our site? And what that is Purdue University. Purdue is spending at least $200 million at the end of State Street to do a very large development. It's going to be housing, it's going to be apartments, it's going to be commercial buildings as well. They've also come across 231 to the west on 26 West, and they put up a number of commercial buildings there. And I would submit to you that this is only the beginning. There's going to be many, many more buildings that they're going to build in the area where we are. The news information that I read says that these sites will create jobs with 300 plus people, for 300 plus people. I believe they're going to employ students, graduate students, young professionals as well. Many are going to want to live close to where they work. And the petitioner here tonight is dedicated, I think, to improving the quality of the developments. He's done this locally. He's done it nationally. They have do a great job and have a very great product, in my opinion. So what we've proposed here is an excellence campus to house these people that are coming in. And I would tell you that, in my opinion, what this site is really is a buffer. It's a buffer for the R1 residential to the west, and it's for the commercial buildings to the east. And we have an excellent buffer in between those with green space trees. I think it's perfect for that purpose. I'd also state to you that for the student viewpoint, you know, there's a lot of students. They want to live on top of each other. They want to live in the village, near the village. They want to have a bar close to them. But there's also a different element of the students that don't want to have all those interruptions. They want to have green space. They want to have trees. They want to have a different college experience. I think that's what we're offering here. I walked this south site, and if you stand in the middle of that where we're going to have our development and look around, all you see are trees. It is totally isolated from everything. It's just a wonderful site in that regard. And the houses are rarely visible, in my opinion, that you see from our side. So with the protection we offer by our commitments for both the north and south track, we're going to have little impact, in my opinion, on the neighborhood. We exceed all setbacks, all building, all green space requirements as well. I don't think I've ever had a development such as this to have exceeded the requirements of the Unified Zoning Ordinance like they've done tonight. We're proposing a $50 million plus development with all types of styles and building mixes for this site. The project is going to be similar to the cottages that they did on Lindbergh. That's an older site. It's still in excellent condition. The occupancy has been good with the ups and downs in the economy. That's survived very well and done very nicely. So with that, I'd answer any questions and be happy to respond to any comments that you might have. And I'll turn it over now to the other representative of the team. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Hi, everyone. My name is Jeff Knable. Good evening. I live at 231 East Sunset Lane in West Lafayette. And thank you for your time and consideration this evening. So why is Trinitas proposing a project in this location? Because we feel this location and the use we're proposing is appropriate in the context of the growth that's occurring westward in and around this area. And that's not to say we don't appreciate the hard work, effort, and planning that staff and others put into the comp plan and into the 231 corridor study. We certainly do appreciate that. But our proposed development, a Purdue-centric, medium-density community, is well suited for this location as it sits directly in the path of growth dominated by Purdue's Discovery Park District. As most of you probably know, Discovery Park District is a 20-year, $1 billion build-out of 400 acres on Purdue's western edge, consisting of research space, office space, new retail, grocery, and 200 acres of aerospace targeted industrial park jobs. An entire city is less than a mile from the site that we're proposing on tonight. We want to give residents who are not living in the dorms and who don't yet want to buy a house the ability to live in close proximity to this new city, in close proximity to the thousands of jobs coming less than a mile away from this site. Trinitas site is far superior location. If you could advance the slide, Ryan, thank you. The Trinitas site, as you can see, is a far superior location than the existing off-campus medium density housing stock far to the north side of the city of West Lafayette. Trinitas shuttles and city bus can get our future residents to the new jobs and other locations within Discovery Park District in minutes, as well as various points around campus in the city of West Lafayette. The other question that a lot of people ask is there demand for more student housing? Like, really, you're really building more student housing? And I answer that by saying, without question, yes, there is demand for more student housing. And here's why. Purdue announced record enrollment of 45,869 students in fall of 2020. Purdue's ranked the 9th best undergraduate engineering program in the country by U.S. News and World Report, and Purdue has not had a tuition increase since 2012. The demand for Purdue's high quality and affordable education has never been higher. And this is reflected in the student housing occupancy rates. Fall 2020 saw total occupancy rates of 90%. Stronger demand exists for the newer housing products. That's products built since 2012. Those show a 95% occupancy rate. Hub State Street was the exception, but is currently pre-leasing at 88% for the upcoming school year. Demand is extremely high for cottage-style housing, such as the one we're proposing tonight, as evidenced by cottages on Lindbergh, a Trinitas development, showing over 95% occupancy today. These low-density and spacious homes appeal to the resident who want distance from their neighbor and ample outdoor recreational opportunities. With enrollment growth expected to continue at Purdue, as evidenced by 6 consecutive years of enrollment growth averaging 1,183 students per year, the need for additional housing absolutely exists. And by the way, as of December 2020, there are no publicly known on or off campus, private, student-oriented housing projects planned for West Lafayette. Finally, why the rezone? Why are we asking for a rezone tonight? Well, the current R1 zoning designates an area where only single-family residents are allowed. Trinitas could build a single-family style neighborhood and rent to students, but that plan would require maximizing every square foot of dirt out there on the site. This means less tree preservation and smaller buffers between that development and the neighbors. Basically, that means a plan that would follow the basic minimum zoning requirements. By upzoning a portion of the site to R3, we're able to protect existing trees and natural buffers. Our plan, we feel, is far superior to an R1 only plan for this reason. It allows us to maximize the open space, offer product diversity, and manage this community in a way that creates an actual community environment. So now I'd like to ask my colleague Linda to speak to the details of our plan, please.
Sure, if you could advance the slide, please. So good evening, everyone. I'm Linda Irving. I'm a development manager with Trinitas Ventures. I'd like to build upon what my associates have conveyed. So we at Trinitas are passionate about this property and this opportunity to develop it thoughtfully for multi-family cottage homes. With that passion comes a certainty about the vision for the site and this willingness to commit to perpetual constraints that would not only enhance the experience for our residents, but we believe it would be considerate of the neighbors around us. As you've heard, our rezone application includes commitments that Trinitas is happy to make. The commitments are broken into the 2 parts as demonstrated on this parcel exhibit. In regards to real estate one, as you've heard, it would be remain R1, and the minimum setback would be increased from 6 to 25 feet. As that parcel is configured today, it only has a 6-foot setback on that side of the property as it exists today. On the real estate number 2, which is the southern parcel, again, we are committing to some substantial, what we believe substantial commitments, 100-foot setback on this western side of the parcel, tree preservation of 75 feet. We're preserving 30 on the farthest south portion of this site also. And we are also very committed to the dark sky guidelines for site lighting, and have no problem committing to specifications as needed in the future to give everyone a comfort level on that element. Slide forward, please. As part of the rezone request, we understand the community deserves the right to hear the design game plan. So to that end, I'm going to take a minute to walk you through the concepts and site plan at a high level. First of all, we're not developing the site to the fullest that R3 would allow. Instead, we're choosing a design approach that preserves as much of the existing vegetation and natural elements that exist today in the form of wooded zones, stream, and the wetlands that we found on the site at the beginning of the site planning process. We actually purposely decided to design and work around that. In regards to the maximum building coverage, R3 would allow 30%. Well, this project will demonstrate less than 20%. Also specific to the minimum vegetative cover, R1 requires 40%, R3 requires 30%. Our project plan is to provide a minimum of 50% minimum vegetative cover. As part of this site planning effort, we worked with American Structure Point and Traffic Engineering Incorporated, who offered civil and traffic engineering expertise. Our primary driveway location is positioned to provide the maximum safety for vehicular movements. Our Traffic Engineering Incorporated was specifically engineered to develop a traffic impact analysis, which, as Ryan mentioned, has been preliminarily reviewed with Indiana DOT. The curve and slope of 26 were also factored, and the location meets, and this driveway location meets the requirements for proper driveway positioning. The traffic impact analysis results drive the development to include both an XL and decel taper leading up to and following the driveway entrance. The development would include a restricted emergency only drive for the local fire department. As is typical for our off-campus residential communities, we also plan to include 2 daily shuttles that run 7 days a week. These shuttles are the primary mode of off-campus resident transportation, and it's greatly reducing the volume of traffic beyond that of the counts that were even factored in the basic baseline traffic impact analysis. In practicality, some historical data from similar projects demonstrate shuttle usage to reduce the total potential vehicular movements by approximately 22% overall, and specifically a 50% reduction in the AM peak travel times. In summary, we feel our community's transportation plan would have far less impact on peak travel times than a single family home development might have. We also intend to exceed the landscape buffer requirements, integrate walking paths and outdoor recreation, providing this unique mix of cottage-style homes with a modern farmhouse design element vibe. We also are providing through this site plan a subtle progression of height and density that begins at the entrance but gradually culminates toward the eastern portion of the site toward the railroad line. The majority of the homes are 2-story duplex cottages with 3 3-story cottage courtyard cottage buildings that will be placed along the rear rail yard line end of the property. Next slide. If you wonder how this development or how this neighborhood might look in context of the surrounding properties, this aerial illustration should help paint that picture. As you can see, this community has existing forestation that serves well as a natural border to the development. The homes all site well within the border, plus neighboring properties have very little direct visibility to this site, as Dan had mentioned from his site visit. We believe that this is going to help maintain a much deserved set of privacy for those folks around us and for us. Finally, next slide. The homes we intend to build are loosely rendered on these slides. As stated, we envision a modern farmhouse cottage look for the community. We also feel confident that the quality and nature of our homes will fit right in line with this stretch of communities along 26. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris King, our co-owner and Executive Vice President of Development and Construction.
All right, thank you, Linda. Hello, everyone, and thank you to the Area Planning Commission for taking the time to hear about our plan to develop a Class A multifamily residential neighborhood in Tippecanoe County. I would like to take a couple of minutes to discuss who Trinitas is. Please advance the slide. Once again, I'm Chris King, and I'm a founder and co-owner of Trinitas Ventures. I'd like to express my excitement that we are able to pursue this development in our hometown. For those of you that don't know us, Trinitas is a top 25 national developer of student housing. Please advance the slide. We have developed nearly $1 billion worth of real estate across the country, from Alabama in the south to Michigan in the north, from Virginia across the nation to Washington state. We develop what is known in our industry as Class A real estate, which means it is of the highest quality in the best locations with a high quality resident base. Please advance the slide. I would like to share with you a couple examples of communities we have developed across the country. This here is a 20-story high-rise in downtown Tempe, Arizona. It is an urban project with all the best amenities, including a rooftop pool. It is going to open this August. Please advance the slide. Oh, excuse me. That's what I was talking about. Please advance the slide one more time. All right. The next project I want to share is a 5-story mid-rise we built in Fayetteville, Arkansas. It has interesting architecture that matched the direction the city of Fayetteville wanted to go. Please advance this slide. As you can tell, we do not have a cookie cutter design that we jam onto every site in every community. Instead, we match our design to both the site and the community. Specifically to West Lafayette, we believe a cottage style, low density community is the best fit for the site. Although we now have a national footprint, Trinitas got its start right here in Tippecanoe County when my father, Michael King, and my brother, Lauren King, founded Trinitas in a farmhouse off Lindbergh Road. Lauren and I are both lifelong residents of Tippecanoe County and graduates of Harrison High School. Trinitas is currently headquartered in downtown Lafayette. Our business has its roots in my father's early passion for real estate. In the late 1970s, he began purchasing real estate near Purdue's campus. He pursued the classic strategy for monopoly, where he bought several houses in a row. He would then tear them down and replace them with a small apartment building. However, in the late 90s, we began the development of the largest student housing community at Purdue at the time, Willowbrook West, which opened its first phase in 2000. My father, brother, and I decided that we should take advantage of the knowledge we gained and expand to other university towns. It was then in 2002 that we founded Trinitas Ventures. We had the opportunity to again develop locally in 2012 when we developed the cottages on Lindbergh. So it was with great excitement that I again get to develop in my hometown. Further, I actually live just down the road from the site off 400 West in Kingswood. I will drive by this development every day on the way to the office. So from the very beginning of the process, I emphasized to my team that I want this neighborhood to be very high quality, respectful to both my neighbors and the beautiful site that it will sit upon. I believe they answered their call, and their plan both preserves the natural vegetation as well as goes out of its way to respect the privacy of its neighbors. This is exactly the kind of community we need more of. It has well thought through architecture, plenty of open space, surrounded by trees, with nice outdoor amenities and walking paths where our residents can be outside and active. We have met with many of the neighbors and community members, and a constant refrain we hear, even from those that are opposed to this rezone, is that they have little objection to the actual site layout or architecture. So in closing, I would like the commission to support this rezone and support innovative, high-quality investment in Tippecanoe County. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Teeter, Mr. Knable, Ms. Irving, and Mr. King. With that, we will move to, just so everybody understands the order, we'll move to some questions from the commission members. We will then ask those wishing to speak in favor of the petition. Sally, do we have anyone in the room wishing to speak?
We have folks in the room. Do any of you want to speak in favor? They're all speaking in opposition.
Okay. So we'll give a minute for those to speak in favor, both that and social media, then in opposition. and then petitioner's rebuttal. At this point in time, it is time for commission members' questions, comments. Floor is open. Hearing no questions at this point in
Sorry,
time.
Jackson, I've got a,
Oh, there you go.
sorry, just a point of clarification. I'm sorry if I missed this, but is the plan just to develop the R3 zoned space at this point, or are you looking at doing both sites?
At this point, we're looking at just developing the R3 site. The R1 was done to, to protect the Orchard residents to the north.
Thank you.
And I just want to make sure I understand, this is what you're planning, but if we approve this tonight, there's no guarantee that this will happen, or is there?
No, this is not a planned development. This is just a site plan that we think is appropriate for this. If it was zoned, yes, it could change from that drawing.
So what you presented today could change easily, yes?
Well, I don't know about easily, because we have commitments with it for the tree preservation and the setback.
Okay.
So I think that, yes, it could look a little different, could look substantially different. I don't think so. The other thing I mentioned too, that even though we say that the north part is R1, to get to that R1, if we do this development, will not be an easy proposition, because it would have to be a public road. So the likelihood is that that would not be developed for quite some time, if ever.
If you don't mind, this is Linda Irving. I'd like to add to that. So we are very committed to this layout, so much so that we have had conversations with the planning folks, and also, again, we've communicated this this design to the neighborhood associations and internally in our organization. We would not see that the only real changes that would come out of this process are those ones that maybe the Area Planning Commission directors may feel are required or needed from their perspective to make it a more viable site layout and development. This is our game plan that we would go in with, and you know, we are open to the feedback from area planning directors. But I believe that would be the only thing that would really drive us in any kind of different direction, is if they have a critique or a concern about a particular element that would require modification. Does that
Right,
answer?
there's no legal requirement that you follow this plan. That's what I'm trying to say. You're committed to it, but that's different than a planned development, correct?
I believe that is accurate as it relates to a rezone versus a planned development.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, Lisa, that's correct. They would only legally be bound to the use restrictions, development standards of the R3 zone, and the commitments that they've agreed to and that would have been recorded at the time that they begin to subdivide.
I'll just add, this is Don Lamb. I review all the major subdivisions. If this property does get rezoned, they would have to also file subdivision for a multifamily subdivision application that goes through all those stages: sketch plan, preliminary plat, construction plans, and final plat. They would also have to provide a public road through this, so they would not landlock the R1 zone property.
And Don, for clarification, and then that comes back before this commission once again.
It does, yes.
Thank you.
Our engineers for this project, American Structure Point, are well versed in that process. So they're also committed to supporting us to follow all the steps that are required to successfully develop this project.
If we're hearing no other further questions from the commission members at this point in time, we can now take those wishing to speak in favor And I understand there is nobody in the room, Sally, that is wishing to speak in favor of this, but we will give it a minute to see if there are any more comments on social media. Mr. Burns, question for you, for those that are wishing to speak in opposition when that time comes. If a letter has been submitted and signed and is part of the record, that party has basically waived their right to speak. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes, that is correct. Under the bylaws, if they have submitted a letter in compliance with the bylaws, then that would replace their right to speak.
Thank you.
Jackson?
Yes.
Mr. Andrioli submitted a list of the speakers, and we checked it against the letters. None of the speakers listed sent a letter.
Thank you for that, Sally. I should have relied on you first. One demerit for me. Okay, Ryan, have we received anything from social media in favor of this?
Presently, there's nothing on YouTube. On Facebook, there's a lot of chatter, I think, between individuals. I did a quick scan. There's no comments directed to us that are in favor.
Thank you. We will now move to those in opposition, wishing to speak in opposition.
Would you like to start with those in the meeting room?
I think that would be excellent, Sally. Thank you. If you would kind of spearhead that, I'd appreciate it.
Will do. And you'll be able to see the speaker at the podium.
I'm Eric Barker. My family and I live at 1157 Parview Drive in the Greens subdivision near the intersection of Klondike Road and State Road 26. I've been asked by the leadership of our homeowners association to represent those living on Parview Drive in the Greens that have signed the petition against the rezone, encouraging you to reject this rezone request. My family has lived in the Greens for over 10 years, and prior to that, we lived in Huntington Farms, again, just off State Road 26. We were some of the first residents in Huntington Farms going back to 1998 when we moved to the greater Lafayette area, when I assumed employment at Purdue. We have watched the residential communities develop along 26 and have been pleased with the commitment to single-family homes and the quality of life that the area provides. When we moved here in 1998, our real estate agent deliberately steered us away from subdivisions near student housing. We were attracted to the area along 26 west of campus because of the proximity to campus, the rural feel, and the lack of student housing. Make no mistake, the West Campus Cottages development described in the rezone will be Purdue student housing. The presence of high-density student housing along 26 will impact negatively our ability to continue to recruit Purdue faculty and staff, as well as other families, to our subdivisions, as proximity to student housing and the associated problems is undesirable. Please do not erode the quality of life for the residents in our neighborhoods by approving this rezone request. With over 750 occupants planned, the West Campus Cottages development will further impact the daily lives of those of us that live west of campus along State Road 26. Potentially having over 750 additional cars traveling along State Road 26 to and from campus each day is of great concern, and we see at least two major issues. First, we are concerned about significant congestion in and around the new roundabout at Newman Road and 26, as well as at the 26 and US 231 intersection. The Schweitzer Engineering Lab, the SEL facility, is hoping to grow post-COVID to around 250 to 300 employees, with a planned expansion in the second 5 years of their growth plan to a total of 600 employees. The Aerospace District and Saab facility will also be adding around 300 employees to this growing area in the next few years. The employees here will be largely well-paid professionals looking for single-family homes, not students looking for student housing. The combination of productive economic growth in these PRF districts near 231 will naturally result in increased traffic at the 26 and 231 intersections. Adding 750 student vehicles to the mix would be highly problematic, adding congestion and increasing risk of accidents. Second, as someone who travels 26 to campus each day, I'm very concerned about the safety issues of having 750 cars going in and out of this new development. The area near the entrance to the West Campus cottages along State Road 26 is at a curvature in the road that has elevation changes, making a line of...
Sir, you're at 3 minutes. If you would conclude, please. This is Eric Burns, the attorney speaking. Thank you.
Yeah, we were still told we had 5. Is that correct?
Mr. Bogan?
5 is correct.
That is correct. 5 is correct, Mr. Burns.
I apologize. You have a full 2 minutes to go. My apologies to you, sir.
So again, the elevation change makes line of sight in both directions problematic. We have grave concerns about the ability to safely create an entrance at this location for such a large development. Furthermore, this project is in a location without interconnectivity to critical infrastructure such as roads and sidewalks and bike paths to help transport students by foot or bike. This type of development simply works better in urban or quasi-urban areas with supporting elements for high-density housing. With my professional understanding of the projected flat or declining enrollments in higher education over the next decade, and as I assess the student housing projects recently completed in the Chauncey area and that are currently already underway, the continuum on State Street and the Old Town Provenance development at State and Airport Road, I fail to see the need for the West Campus cottages. With this being unneeded student housing, we have significant concerns that this project will fail economically and ultimately turn into low rent housing. For these reasons, we ask that you preserve the quality of the single family residential homes along State Road 26 west of campus by rejecting this rezone request. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
No, just go ahead and say next slide.
Okay. Go ahead and next slide.
Sir, if you would, name and address for the record, please.
Yeah, my name is Ryan Goebel. My address is 2440 State Road 26 West. I'd like to address a few points. My family and I live immediately adjacent to the proposed rezone. We bought our home 6.5 years ago after looking for 6 months. We looked all over the Lafayette area, and when we found this house, we fell in love with it in this area immediately. We recognized it was the kind of environment we wanted to raise our kids in. I had researched the adjacent properties and zoning and felt comfortable with what I'd found. I even spoke with the owner of the property in question and asked if he would ever consider selling, and he said no. The proposed rezone, if approved, will fundamentally change the demeanor of this area and set a precedent for urban crawl that will destroy the appeal of this area. The APC gets to decide how the community will grow in a responsible way that protects the interest of all stakeholders, particularly homeowners. I feel the APC has done a fine job in this area, laying out zoning that fits the needs of the community. As an example of this foresight, I would like to draw your attention to the 2020 update of the Tippecanoe County Student Rental Report. Specifically on page 16, under conclusions and recommendations, quote, the city should continue to support the urban densification of the near campus area while discouraging increases in large undergraduate-oriented multifamily developments in its outlying areas. The exception to the multifamily expansion in the periphery continues to be the projects that cater to a diverse mix of individuals which are walkable to commercial activity centers and transit. The proposed project is geared towards students and it exists in an outlying area and is not walkable to any amenities. Also in the report on page 19, under guiding policies and recommendations, point number 4, require compelling data from developers that supports significant increases in student-oriented residential density, particularly along fringe areas of the campus and West Lafayette city limits. Trinitas has not presented any compelling data to support a significant increase in student-oriented residential density. And point number 6 in the report, discourage the development of multifamily residential developments on the urban fringe and that are not along transit route and not adjacent and walkable to a major
Commercial Activity Center. Again, this location is not walkable. The nearest commercial center is Purdue West, which according to Google Maps is 1.2 miles away, a 23-minute walk. I'm sure some might be tempted to bike as well. However, a significant portion of this trek is along a treacherous stretch of Highway 26 with no sidewalk, walk path, and virtually no shoulder. I further question the need for additional student housing. The report states that in 2019, a record number of new multifamily units opened with over 2,500 bedrooms. Additionally, there are 7 projects in various stages of completion that will add at least 1,300 more bedrooms. First slide, please. Another interesting perspective on the student housing situation has come to light from some recent studies on annual birth rates. There was a dramatic decrease starting in 2007, which will correlate to a college enrollment decline starting in 2025. Next slide, please. Furthermore, Purdue has taken a decidedly on-campus approach to student housing, following information which shows an increase in academic success with on-campus housing. In 2019, Purdue had nearly 42% of undergraduate students residing in on-campus housing, the highest on record. Next slide, please. Lastly, a recent phone call survey of West Lafayette apartment complexes revealed surprising vacancy rates, over 17%. Next slide, please. While there is much uncertainty due to COVID and many other factors, there certainly is enough information to cause one to question if more student housing is really necessary right now. Earlier, I mentioned the stretch of Highway 26 where the proposed project would have its entrance. If you're not familiar with it, it's particularly curvy and hilly. When I prepare to leave my driveway, I have to sit and watch to the east for 5 seconds at least, because the hills and curves conceal oncoming traffic from that direction. The proposed entrance is exactly in that area and would only further make pulling out a hazard. As recent weather demonstrates, slide-offs are common on this part of the highway. Also, in the last 2 years, we've had our mailbox taken out, a distracted driver missed the curve and plowed into the tree line, and had a drunk take out our neighbor's utility pole. Adding 1,000 new drivers to a single driveway in this section of 26 surely is a bad idea. Trinitas has suggested that traffic issues won't be as bad as we were fearing because they will provide a 24/7 shuttle service. While some students may utilize this, many will not. And the thought of having a bus running at all hours of the night just 100 feet from my children's bedroom does not ease my mind. When petitioning for a rezone of a property, the petitioner needs to demonstrate a significant benefit to the community by rezoning. I would argue that Trinitas has not made a single compelling argument to justify the change in zoning. The APC's own report, master plan, and bylaws clearly point to the conclusion that this project is not a fit for this area. This area does not need a buffer. It needs to stay single-family homes. I hope that for the above reasons and many others presented tonight, you will vote no to this rezoning. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening. My name is Kevin Keckler. I'm a homeowner at 2464 Gala Court in the Orchard subdivision, approximately a 9-iron away from this proposed neighborhood. One area of deep personal concern with this proposed rezone involves public safety as a first responder. I'm now entering my 19th year as a firefighter and currently serve as Deputy Chief of the Wabash Township Fire Department. Our department covers unincorporated West Lafayette and roughly 56 square miles of territory from South River Road to north of Commissioner Byers' residence, 5 or 6 miles west of 231, and east all the way to the Indiana Veterans Home. During my time on the department, the growth we've seen in our jurisdiction is unprecedented. We've continued to adapt, train, and work together with our surrounding agencies to cover our territory exceptionally well. In 2002, when I started, we were doing 400 plus calls a year. In 2019 and 2020, we averaged just shy of 1,275 calls. Since this meeting began tonight, we've had 1 structure fire. We just got towed to another house fire for a kitchen fire and a medical run to a cottage off of Klondike Road. I tell you this because we are truly tested every day to operate as a volunteer department with this run load. Adding yet another high-density college student housing complex will only make our job more difficult. To be clear, we're already in the business of running calls to the complexes similar to the Trinitas proposal. Wabash Fire currently covers Villages West, Cottages on Lindbergh, Red Point, West Ridge Flats, Trailside Flats, A-Light Apartments, Baywater, and Campus Suites. If some of those names don't ring a bell, it's because they have all changed names numerous times after the original developers sold them. No different than what will happen with this Trinitas proposal. In fact, I visited all of the cottage style complexes we cover to find out what their occupancy rate actually was, with the lowest at 85% and the highest at 92. That would lead me to believe there's plenty of empty beds currently available. This did not include standard apartments, just the cottage townhome style that Trinitas is talking about. This leads me to my final points. If you haven't yet, I would advise you to go through the FAQ on the website for Trinitas's West Campus Cottages project. Two things stuck out to me. One, will this development decrease safety resources like EMS, fire, and police, and cause an increase in property taxes? These two comments aren't related. Resources in our world mean human responders in emergency vehicles able to provide protection and treatment. Having 750 plus students in this area will absolutely demand more EMS, fire, and police resources than a single family neighborhood would. Trinitas also states their property tax money, approximately $850,000, will go directly towards adding new resources for emergency services, not diminish them. This particular statement is flawed in multiple ways. Wabash Township Fire Department does not directly receive any of that tax money. The monies are thrown into a larger tax pot, with the vast majority going to schools. And then what's left over is distributed to libraries, parks, highways and roads, police, fire, EMS, and even cemetery maintenance. To the general public reading the West Campus Cottages website, this sounds like their tax money will buy us a new fire truck or two. That's incredibly misleading. Secondly, won't there be more accidents on 26 because of this development? Trinitas couldn't even answer this question on their website, so allow me to assist. The answer is yes. Their traffic study suggested adding a deceleration and acceleration lane to the project to help mitigate the potential for accidents. For the record, I checked with the county and confirmed there were 10 accidents in 2019 and 4 in 2020, as well as 2 additional hit and runs. This would indicate that when things return to normal, no pandemic where everyone works from home, no road being closed due to a roundabout being installed, traffic will return to pre-2019 standards and bring with it more accidents. Now, imagine 750 college kids going in and out of this location every day. It's impossible to know what the total number of accidents will be, but in this line of work, even 1 is too many. I hope for the sake of the emergency responders and the Wabash Township Fire Department like myself, you say no to this proposal.
Thank you, sir.
My name is Bart Cole. I live at 642 North Street Chapel Road. We good? All right. We've lived there for 7 years, and my wife's family lived there for 18 years in the area prior. We're best in the community, and we know the area. We understand that change happens and concluded that the parcel in question would eventually be built on. In good faith, we believe that the land would stay zoned R1 for single-family homes. I have researched their surrounding zoning and wish to purchase our home based on the single-family homes R1 zoning that the area around our home was zoned as. As a Marine of 12 years and a law enforcement officer of 11 years, I have lived and worked around many apartments. Through those experiences, I decided to find a home that was not an apartment, rental cottage, condo, or around other apartments. I wonder about the need for the dense apartment type buildings in the area. I'm concerned that the high density living areas that are being built or have been built on or very near Purdue campus are going to draw more and more students to those areas as the surrounding apartments struggle to maximize their occupancy rates. Who will fill those apartments and how will they be managed? Is there a need? Is it the right fit for the area? I would see this as a near future problem for the development if the land was rezoned to R3. That is a problem that my neighbors and I would be forced to live with or move from. Being forced into that kind of situation builds resentment. We moved here to live in a community of single family homes, a neighborhood of homeowners. We have 4th of July neighborhood cookouts every year. We have checked in on each other and helped one another during this COVID pandemic. We talk to each other when we are out for walks with our dogs. We slow down and wave at each other on our travels through the area. We cheer the Wabash fire trucks on our way to a call. And we bow our heads and say a silent prayer as they pass by. We know each other and take care of each other. We don't want to have a 700+ bed facility next door to us that will bring excessive traffic, extra light and noise pollution, more littering, and now those people on continuous residential rotation that are not vested in our community, potentially sink our property values that we work so hard to pay the bills and taxes on. From working as a uniformed law enforcement officer, narcotics detective for the Tippecanoe County Drug Task Force, and a task force officer with the DEA, I witnessed seeing apartments such as Willowbrook, whatever it's called now, Williamsburg on the Wabash, which is now called the Launch, the apartments along Horizon Drive, east of Klondike, Richfield Apartments, and the apartments at 320 Brown, among many more, struggle to maximize their occupancy, battle poor management, and backfill many student apartments with very non-student types. I've dealt with serious violent sex offenders, dangerous drugs, and drug dealing, illegal weapons crimes within many apartments and rentals. Very rarely, if at all, did I deal with these issues in single-family homes that were owned by the occupier. I've also witnessed the ink lot effect, where one apartment or cottage complex is built and the land and neighborhood around it eventually are consumed by property development businesses that may begin local, but then rapidly sell off to out-of-area management companies. This brings unintended consequences, such as a rise in not only major crimes that I mentioned, but lesser crimes against people and property that we don't want in our neighborhood, where we live, where our peace is, and where our families are attempting to thrive. We have a vested interest in common sense, single-family homes being the sole zoning on the parcel in question and any surrounding areas. Please help us to keep our neighborhood a neighborhood that we enjoy living in, can share in the daily lives of our community, and one that we're proud to call our home. I thank my neighbors for calling on me to represent them. I thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, sir, and thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Scott Kemp. I live at 1363 Priscilla Court in the Orchard. My family and I purchased our home in August of 2019 as we were relocating from Washington State for my position with Schweitzer Engineering, which is also obviously new to the area and currently establishing itself as a community leader in the greater Lafayette area. In August of 2019, my wife and I visited the area in efforts to find a home that we wanted to live in, as well as settle into our new community. After exhausting nearly a dozen homes within a 5-day window, we were shown our current home on Priscilla Court as our last home to look at before flying back to Washington State. We viewed homes in all areas, both in West Lafayette and Lafayette, in efforts to find a home that met our needs. We were looking for a home that was large enough to provide our college-age daughter her own space within reasonable distance to Purdue University, in hopes that she would be attending, which, by the way, she is. And after exhausting nearly all those dozen homes, we found 1363 Priscilla Court. It was close to Purdue, close to beautiful community events within and around West Lafayette, close to my work, and it was also a clean, safe, and well-established community. As our house hunting trip neared its end and we toured the home within the Orchard community, it was clear that this home, area, and amenities checked the boxes on our list for our new home in Indiana. Over the past 12 months, we've been extremely happy with our decision and our choice, not only in our home and community, but also in our decision to move to Indiana. Throughout the process of buying and relocating, all the people that we spoke to and came across told us that West Lafayette and the Orchard subdivision in particular were considered to be the most desirable locations. These people were 100% accurate. Our community is wonderful. It's a quiet, family-based subdivision that maintains the feel of seclusion and peacefulness while being close to wonderful amenities that our great town has to offer. With recent developments surrounding the potential rezoning and development of the acreage currently used as farmland on Highway 26, we fear that my neighborhood, as well as the surrounding community, will be negatively impacted if you as elected officials allow the rezoning from R1 to R3 to occur. The proposed development shows plans for high-density student housing that they want to build. And since my property directly joins the northern portion of the land in question, I have a vested interest
and ensuring that the rezoning does not get approved. I understand that I can't prevent all development on that land since it's currently zoned as R1. But I believe that if we rezone to R3, it'll be a devastating change to a highly regarded, beautiful area within Tippecanoe County. In closing, I feel as a taxpayer and voting member of our community, it is imperative that we do not allow the precedent of rezoning the current farmland to R3. Currently, no other land in our community is zoned to R3. This type of request does not fit within what I believe our community standards to be. The decision feels very pivotal. If you owned my home, ask yourself, what would you do? Are you willing to put long-term tax-paying residents at risk within your county for a development that truly does not belong and is not needed in our overall community? How does the county plan to support the impact to the county long-term? This is not a scenario that can be allowed to be introduced into this area. Thank you for your time to hear my concerns. As a new resident of Tippecanoe County, I am highly optimistic and confident that this commission will hear the voices of the people and act within their best interest rather than put any type of short-term financial gains as a priority. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak here today. My name is Ulrike Dudak, and I live at 2489 Gala Drive. My husband and I are both faculty members at Purdue University. We've lived in the Orchard neighborhood for the past 15 years, where we've raised our 2 children on a property directly adjacent to the field that is subject to rezoning. I strongly oppose rezoning this field to anything other than single-family homes. Our neighborhood is home to a particularly large percentage of Purdue faculty and staff. On campus, we work and interact with students every day, and we would not have chosen our professions if we did not enjoy doing so. But I believe I speak for all of us when I say that we have purposely chosen to live off campus, close to work, yet far away from the bustle of student life. As Purdue faculty and staff, we care for and we respect our students. But at the end of the day, we value getting a break from campus. Coming home from work, we can escape the noisy, animated environment associated with our students and get a chance to wind down and have a private life that won't appear on Rate My Professor the next day. My husband and I moved here as young professionals 15 years ago with a 6-month-old baby. As a household with 2 working parents, it was particularly important to us to find a neighborhood where neighbors know each other and can rely on each other. This could all change with nearly 1,000 tenants coming and going annually right next door. The particular sense of community that the people who are invested in our neighborhood area possess, and here I do not only speak of the Orchard, but the whole corridor along State Route 26 that is currently zoned R1, has once again come to light in our common concerns about this rezone. You have received over 80 emails from concerned residents even before the developer's petition for rezone was filed. We have now filed again 98 individual and signed letters of opposition and collected over 600 signatures, of which over 350 are on paper. Can I have the next slide, please? In addition to the nearly 100 letters, over 100 people have commented online on our online petition site. As you can see here on the next slide, please. You can see there's over 117 comments. People have commented, and I invite the commissioners to visit this petition page to browse through those comments as well. Next slide, please. This next slide shows where every person lives who has signed our petition, either on paper or online. These are not just our buddies from across town who clicked on the button to do us a favor. As you can see here, over 85% of the 600 signatures and 98 letters come from residents directly affected by such a rezone, living in the Orchard, on Sharon Chapel, the Greens, all the way to Kingswood and further. People whose commute to work is affected and who worry about this precedent of allowing a high-density development to come to this area. For every single paper signature, people endured below freezing temperature, snow and ice, and even twisted ankles in order to provide or collect signatures in person. We helped each other on a one-to-one basis to convert personal emails of opposition to the letter format required by the APC. While not everybody has a printer or knows how to scan a signature, everybody wanted their voice be heard. I would like to add one last point. Trinitas keeps mentioning that they care and that they have addressed most of our concerns. One of their main offers in their presentation to us is to keep the north side of the field zoned R1 perpetually. However, we know from personal conversation between my husband and the current owner of the field, who for many years was absolutely not interested in selling, that the offer he got this time around was so high that nobody could blame him for changing his mind. He was offered a price in the millions. With this information, everybody can do the math. A company that actually praises its employees on their webpage, and I quote, for going above and beyond to utilize any means necessary to increase the company's bottom line, will definitely not be able to increase its bottom line if they leave this part of the field an R1 zone in the future. So don't be fooled, that empty field in the R1 zoning in the north will not stay like that. Furthermore, Trinitas has sold nearly all their developments in this area shortly after developing them. Once even a part of this field is rezoned to R3, the damage is done. If a precedent is set for R3 zoning in our area, there would not be much reason anymore to deny a rezone of the rest of the field, and much more such developments would no doubt follow in the future. For all the reasons that have been and will be presented here today, and for the over 600 residents who chose to live in this area for the very qualities of not having high-density housing adjacent to their neighborhood, and for all really, and who all really care about the community, I ask of you, please do not let this rezone pass. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. I'm Fred Anderson. I am the long-term resident along 26. Presently live at 2513 McShay Drive. But for the last, since 1964, we have lived on State Road 26. Then and now, the big appeal was of easy proximity to campus, but away from student housing. We've watched the area all along 26 develop for 55 years. It's been single family homes, upper mid price range homes, attractive variety of architecture, nicely laid out streets, just a very pleasant family oriented place to live. In 1964, we bought the property at 1821 State Road 26 West. Along with it, there was a house on that property. Along with it, there was a vacant lot, which became known as 1815. We moved into the house on 1821 in the, well, July 1st of 1964. I was working at Purdue University at the time. And in the fall, I became aware that the homes that were located, the houses that were located where Harrison Hall was to be built, would become available for sale. We had a few dollars left over after buying the house and moving in and doing all the decorating and stuff. Looked into the possibility of buying one of those houses and moving it. Ended up going ahead with that project, hired a company out of Indianapolis to move the house, which they did in the fall of 1964. Just about Thanksgiving time of that year, we moved into that house, lived there until 2014, raised our family there. We're very satisfied. 26, all during that period of time, was a very busy, dangerous road. Pulling out of our driveway was an adventure every day. After the boys were raised, we began looking for a place to possibly build a new home. My wife had always wanted a new home, so we started looking. We were interested in staying in basically the same location and had watched the Orchard subdivision develop. Through phase one, which is basically the part closest to 26, middle section in the middle of it, and then phase three, very back of it. The lot size appealed to us. We were not in each other's pocket. It was a very friendly neighborhood, quite a nice variety of homes. The streets followed the contour of the land. It was in no way a cookie cutter development. We had a house built at 2513 McShay. Back to the development along 26. When we bought in 64, only Green Meadows was a residential development west of the campus. Green Meadows was basically the place people wanted to be if they didn't want to live in West Lafayette. At that point in time, the orchard was, in fact, an apple orchard. The area known as the Greens was a par 3 golf course. There were other smaller developments along 26 off of Drury Lane and Sharon Chapel Road, but they were all single family homes. Most of the other areas out in that direction were farm fields. And with the advent of sewage, gas, and water is when other areas built up. But even so, they were all single family homes, attractive architecture, and in family oriented neighborhoods. For all of these reasons, I would respectfully request that the zoning commission reject the change in zoning to permit building structures which would be totally foreign to what we have grown up, what I have grown up. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, my name is Sue Bailey, and I live at 2493 Gala Drive. My backyard is located directly adjacent to the field being petitioned for this rezone. We purchased this home 3.5 years ago, moving a mere mile south from the Wake Robin subdivision. There were many factors that contributed to us choosing this particular house. Having lived so close, we were very familiar with the orchard. We were drawn here knowing it was a neighborhood of nice homes, a neighborhood with many children and children of our children's age, and more importantly, a neighborhood with a deep sense of community. Our previous neighborhood was, I can't breathe, I'm sorry. Our previous neighborhood was one of the same at one time, but has had such a turnover in ownership that the sense of community has been lost. In fact, there were several homes in that neighborhood rented or owned by Purdue students. Inevitably, these student homes kept our HOA busy fielding complaints from other homeowners due to their neglect of our HOA covenants. I bring this up as firsthand experience of what happens when students live in residential neighborhoods for 2 to 4 years with no vested interest in the community or neighborhood versus living in designated student areas. It is in their nature to lack respect for the greater community and disregard the well-being of their neighbors, such as when we called the police at 2 a.m. one morning because 20 cars showed up at the student's house across the street from us. We were awoken to the banging car doors of over 15 cars, making us think that someone was shooting a gun. This was followed by the loud voices and then loud music as the students began their party at 2 a.m. Again, firsthand knowledge of how people who do not have a vested interest in the community behave. This is not because they're bad people. It's because they are what is technically considered transient or not permanent members of the community. Exactly like the people who would be living in any proposed development built with an R3 zoning. So we find ourselves fighting this because what we moved to the orchard to regain is being threatened by this petition. I have 7 children ranging in the age 24 down to 9. When our 24-year-olds were small children in Wake Robin, we could let them roam to their friend's house with very little concern for their safety. When we left 3 years ago, we did not feel the same about our youngest children roaming. There simply were too many unknowns to feel comfortable letting them go anywhere unaccompanied. The move to the orchard gave for us For our youngest, what we had with our oldest, established families who look out for each other's kids, where we all feel safe letting them walk or ride their bikes in neighborhoods without worry. The neighborhood atmosphere we have surrounding the orchard with single family homes and R1 zone land in all directions contributes to this safe feeling. As much as my family loves having a farmland behind us, we always knew the potential for backyard neighbors was very real. I would often envision the beautiful homes that would one day be built behind us with not 1 ounce of hesitation. However, never once did that vision include anything other than single family homes, because why would it? The corridor of the county has nothing but single family homes. Mind-blowingly absurd would be the thought of an apartment building anywhere near us. Alas, here we are. How utterly disappointing and disheartening the developer who prides themselves on being members of this community, who live in this exact corridor and who claim to be our neighbors, would think this rezone request would be accepted, let alone welcomed. How utterly arrogant for them to think that I would relish the thought of a transient population sharing the same trails as my children and future grandchildren. And there's no other way to describe those who would be living in any development should this rezone be granted from R1 to R3 than transient. There is no other way to describe a transient population than to say they are not invested in a neighborhood or community and will behave as such. Next slide. To further my opposition to this rezone, we have a survey of local Lafayette realtors who were asked pointed questions regarding the impact a rezone to R3 can have on a subdivision such as the orchard. You can see in these slides that the realtors unanimously felt that selling a home in value comparable to those in the orchard is more difficult when that home is next to an R3 density housing than one that is not. Next slide. All but one of the realtors surveyed said an R3 development next to a neighborhood with property values comparable to the orchard would decrease the property values of said neighborhood. And in their professional opinion, they all agreed the area close to campus needs more R1 single family housing. There's a theme here with home values comparable to the orchard. So what does the rezone from R1 to R3 mean to me personally? That everything I moved to the orchard for could be deteriorated. Please deny this rezone. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, members of the Plan Commission. My name is Mike Andrioli. My office address is 1393 West Oak Street in Zionsville. I was retained by the Orchard Community Property Association to first help the neighbors and assist them in vetting this particular project, and then helping to organize what we hope has been a thoughtful and respectful remonstrance to the particular project itself. Also, thanks to Eric Burns in working with us so that we could provide you with the information and the opposition in a way that would not unduly take your time this evening. We hope you had an opportunity to read all of the wet signature letters that were accumulated, as well as the petitions that were submitted as part of the record. Also like to thank staff for the recommendation that they made and the thoughtful report that they had prepared for an analysis that they brought to bear with regard to this proposed rezoning. We thought it was well put together. We thought it had a substantial amount of analysis with it, together with their recommendation, and we urge you to give it the utmost consideration. I want to talk with you briefly now about the statutory requirements. There are 5 in order to go ahead and accomplish a zone map change. You have to consider certain statutory factors. And so let's talk a little bit about those. First, you must give due consideration to the comprehensive plan. I think staff has suggested, and we certainly concur, that there is no support in the comprehensive plan for this rezoning. There is no animus towards Trinitas nor their representatives. By all accounts, there might be some real positives with regard to this particular project. It's just not located in the right area. It's not located in the right tract of land for several reasons that have been discussed with you. So it may ultimately become a benefit to the community if it would move forward, but we would respectfully suggest to you that pursuant to the comprehensive plan, it needs to be located somewhere else, not this particular tract. You must give due regard to current structures in each district. And that's a pretty easy one because the structures in this district, in this zoning classification in the general area, are all single-family residential homes. There is no intrusion into this area for commercial use. There is no intrusion into this area for multifamily use. There is no intrusion into this particular area for any type of student housing. And while we're on that, perhaps rhetorically, we can ask ourselves what potentially would be the benefit of this particular property, given the problems locating it on this site. Purdue and their Collateral Foundation own hundreds of acres in the immediate vicinity close to campus. We have asked, why not locate this project on some of the Purdue ground that would be closer to campus, closer to essential services, closer to connectivity, all of the things that a project of this sort should be. Perhaps Purdue does not want to sell ground. Perhaps they have a different use that they're going to propose to use their ground for in the future. Perhaps it's too expensive. But in the end, there's a substantial amount of acreage close by for student housing if this particular developer would seek it out and work that out with other property owners in the area that might be able to sell them some ground. The most desirable use for which the land in each district is adapted, and we would respectfully request, based upon the comments that you've received in the handwritten letters and the presentations tonight, that the most desirable use of land in this particular area is single-family residential use, not a multifamily project, and certainly not a multifamily project that's catering to student housing with all of the concerns that are being raised tonight with regard to that. If you drive the area, and I'm sure you've taken the time to look at this, if you drive the area, you can see that in particular the Orchard and some of the other subdivisions are low-density single-family housing. They're bucolic areas, and in particular the Orchard, tree-lined streets, and those types of things. Simply beaming this project down in the middle of what is otherwise low-density residential housing is tantamount and a classic example of spot zoning. It's just placed there in the middle of all other single-family residential housing, and it's just not a good fit. It's trying to put a square peg into a round hole. It's not going to work, or it shouldn't. You must consider the conservation of property values throughout the jurisdiction. You've now been provided, and part of the record is the survey that was done with the realtors in the area to determine their thoughts about this particular matter. They're well suited to weigh in on needs, and you will give it the consideration that you feel it deserves with regard to that survey. But they're well qualified in order to do that. They're the ones that help purchasers and sellers with transactions on a day-to-day basis. They have their hand on the pulse of what works and what doesn't, what sells and what doesn't, and whether property values can be maintained or not. They're probably the best guide that we can have of that particular issue, and we would suggest that to change this particular zoning to a high-density multifamily project would forever change that particular area, would open it up to other incursions, and make it more difficult for you to say no to other projects that would totally change or transition the area. And we would respectfully suggest that you decline in doing that. Responsible growth and development. And I would strongly suggest to you that this is not responsible growth and development to put this project at this particular site. I think as Eric Barker had noted in his presentation, there's very little connectivity. There's no bike paths, there's no walking paths along the roadways. These students are going to get where they're going to get to whatever means that they have. And if they ride bikes, they're going to ride bikes. If they want to walk, they're going to walk. The problem is there isn't anything to go to or walk to. There's no interconnectivity with all of the other essential services that these particular students need. So in essence, what's going to happen is they're going to be driving vehicles to get where they need to go because there's no other safe or appropriate way to do it. Or alternatively, they're going to try to get to where they need to go by methods that are not going to be safe in that particular area and create traffic and other hazards for them while they're using the roadways without bike paths or sidewalks. More importantly, with regard to this, there is nothing topographically wrong with this particular site that suggests that it cannot be used as a single-family residential development site. Sometimes with regard to master plans, sometimes with regard to zoning classifications, the land may not ultimately be suitable for the particular use for which it's zoned. We don't have that situation here. This particular site is uniquely qualified for what it is, a single family residential site. And I must suggest to you, the neighbors have enjoyed and would love to continue to enjoy looking out their back doors in the orchard to a field. But they recognize that this has a single family residential classification and that ultimately it may develop as such. They can live with that. They understand when they bought that that was a zoning classification. What they can't live with is this proposed rezoning being beamed into their respective backyards. In conclusion, my clients would respectfully suggest that the Trinitas project be located in another area. We encourage them to work with Purdue or other landowners, stakeholders in the particular area to see whether or not a student housing project would be a good idea, just generally, and where it might ultimately be located. If this is a necessary project for the community, then I would respectfully suggest to you that let the responsible parties, since it's student housing, come to some conclusion on how to integrate it closer to campus and make it a reality there and not necessarily burden the residents in this area with a multifamily project in a low density residential area. If they were to do that and locate it elsewhere, that really would be responsible growth and development. Thank you for allowing us to present tonight. Thank you for your time and listening, and a good evening.
Thank you very much, sir.
That concludes the speakers in the room.
That's all we have, Sally?
Correct.
Thank you. Ryan, do we have anything on social media that we need to?
We have nothing on YouTube, on Facebook. We don't have, we still do not have any comments in favor. The comments are all against, or they are chatter between individuals. I've not seen anything brought up that has not already been raised in the presentations. So that's where we stand.
Thank you very much. With that, I believe it is the time for petitioner's rebuttal. Mr. Teeter?
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I appreciate everybody being so attentive tonight. Listening to this is a fairly long meeting with a lot of comments made. So I appreciate your working with us in that. A couple of comments, and then I might request the other representatives to add to that if I'm missing something. But I wanted to start with first that I requested a sheriff's report for criminal activity, both at the orchards and at the cottages. And I did that for the year from January of 2019 to January of 2021. The orchards during that period of time had 143 calls, 64 were medical. The cottages had 155 calls and 51 were medical. So to me, that would indicate that there is similar activity, whether it's R1 and R3. I think the comments made that if you go to R3, it's hell in a handbasket is totally wrong. I disagree with that. Also, we talk about density. If this site is totally R1 developed versus the apartments that we're talking about below, the density difference is very minimal. It's very, very close to being the same. What you have in R1 is you have a lot of children between grade school age and high school age. So what's going to impact the schools more? It's going to be the R1. It's not going to be the R3. The R3 is going to be students, graduate students, and young marrieds with small children or no children, and those that will go to Purdue. I'll hit on traffic a little bit, but I'll ask Chris later on to maybe add to this. We did hire the traffic engineer, Inc., and they took a look and said, if this was a full build out and COVID was gone, 26 can still accommodate additional traffic. Again, I think the additional traffic would be similar, but we'll get to that in a minute. Signalization is not required. Sight distance exceeds the current minimums of the state standards. The only thing that they suggested was an XL decel lane, which we intend to do. I think the hours of traffic are going to be different for us versus a R1. R1's more of a 9 to 5 probably. We will be at different times. We're going to have a bus stop. We're going to provide shuttle. I don't see where we're going to have that big of an impact on the traffic versus what you would have with R1. Many of the opposition statements refer to our development being located next to their homes. Well, the 18 acres on the north part of the tract will only be R1. So there could be no impact to them on that northern part. The southern part, we got setbacks, we got tree preservation, and that maybe hits 10% of the orchard versus the north part hitting 90%. So again, when they say that we're going to detrimentally affect them by building on the southern part, I don't see where that's going to impact them at all. Trying to get to my other point here. On the value of homes, and I think Jeff will add to this as well, but a good example I'm going to bring up is Happy Hollow Road. I think you're all familiar with that. Apartment complex at the top of Happy Hollow Road. There's an apartment complex that's older towards the bottom, a newer one that's been built. We also have many homes in there. A lot of them have been recently built. Down at the bottom, they're in the $300,000 to $500,000 range. Towards the top, they're at the $1 million range. So perhaps Mrs. Bailey didn't look at or had her realtors look at the site because we've got values increasing, people building next to apartment complexes in that area all the time. I don't think the crime is significant there as well. As to Mr. Andreoli's comments, there's been no update to the plan and for that to be considered. I think, if they want to look at the plan and make some comments with that, I think that's fine. But to use the corridor plan, I just don't see that as being significant. I would also state with regard to that Purdue University doesn't seem to agree with their comments because they're building commercial sites within a half a mile of this area. So to me, again, I point out, I think this is a buffer area between the R1 and the commercial that's there and also that's coming for the future. So with that, I'd ask Jeff to make a couple of comments and Chris to do the same.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. And again, thank you everyone for your time and patience this evening rather. I wanted to make just 3 points. My first point is related to the jobs that are coming to the Discovery Park District. And Ryan, I'm not sure if it's possible to pull up our slide number 2 from the Trinitas presentation. It's the aerial. Thank you. Yeah. So, I talked about the jobs coming to Discovery Park District and the aerospace industrial park in the yellow land west of 231. It was mentioned that Schweitzer Engineering Lab alone west of 231 at State Road 26 has a goal of up to 300 jobs. To think that these new jobs aren't targeting students is not fully accurate. They don't come to Tippecanoe County, and specifically employers aren't coming to Purdue University and Discovery Park District to employ adults. They're here for the bright young minds of Purdue University students to get them into experiential learning jobs so that they can groom them to advance in the company and take on full-time positions once they graduate. So it's absolutely a job area that will target Purdue University students. The second point I'd like to make is related to selling homes is more difficult next to R3. And I would just point to the Blackbird Farms neighborhood along Lindbergh Road. This is a neighborhood of single-family homes that is flanked on 2 sides by R3 development. And it's funny, according to Zillow, values of the homes in Blackbird Farms have increased over the past several years. In fact, in 2011 and 2012, about when the R3 areas were developed across the street, the average home in Blackbird Farms was about $158,000. Today, it's over $224,000 is the average home value there. That's an increase of 41% over time. So we're just not seeing the evidence for decreased home values next to students. And then my third and final point is related to living next to students in general. So I personally have lived in the Hills and Dales, and I currently live in the New Chauncey neighborhood. These 2 neighborhoods are among the most desirable and most expensive in all of the city of West Lafayette. These neighborhoods are immediately adjacent to Purdue, and these neighborhoods are full of student rentals and even Airbnbs. I had an Airbnb next to me in Hills and Dales. And it's just not been my experience presently or when I lived at Hills and Dales that students are necessarily bad neighbors. I know my student neighbors. I'm friendly with them. In fact, we dug each other out of the snowstorm recently. We waved to each other. I find living next to students adds to the richness and vitality of my community that I'm a part of. And so I don't understand the adversity of living next to students. I find them quite enjoyable and friendly to live next to. That concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Knable.
Hello, everyone. I do appreciate all your comments and your feedback. Ryan, if you could be so kind as to pull up one of the renderings that we have provided. Right there. The one prior, please. One of the things I would like to point out is that this is not a high density residential development. This is not packing as many units per acre as possible. Ryan, could you back up one more slide? What we tried to do is we tried to take the needs we had for our development and fit it into the community. And I think we've actually done a very good job at it. I'm very proud of the result. What we've done is you can tell that most of the buildings in the middle of the site are cottages. These are 2-story, mostly duplexes that are very respectful of what has been traditionally in the neighborhood. There's only 3 3-story buildings on the entire site, and those are, you can see, are pushed up against the track on the northeast side, as far away from all residential existing communities as we could possibly get. With existing tree coverage, for most of the year, most of this site will not even be visible. I stood out in the middle of the field in January with no leaf coverage, and you could barely make out a few houses. With full leaf coverage, this will kind of sink into its environment. And actually, the change from R1 to R3 is what enables that to happen. Because we are able to densify and push to the back of the site, we're actually able to leave a lot of open space. And if you notice, there's no units on basically the western, probably 40%, 30% of the site. And that was intentional in order to address the concerns we knew our neighbors were going to have. The second point I'd like to make, as far as traffic is concerned, we have a lot of experience with student traffic, and it is true that while there is more traffic generated than the fields currently, absolutely, students tend to travel what we call non-peak hours, which is their classes don't start at 8 and they don't get out at 5 like all of our jobs. They have classes at various times during the day. They just don't have 8 to 5s, and so they tend to drive during hours that aren't peak, meaning the road can handle the amount of traffic they generate. I mean, I live out here, I drive this road every day, and I would not propose something that I thought would put my own children in danger, because I have a 14-year-old son right now who, by the time this will be developed, he'll be 16, he'll be driving this road, and I absolutely would not want anything to endanger him or this community. And I believe that going through the process that we are going through with DOT will ensure that this will be a safe intersection. And finally, I would like to address the view of the nature of Purdue students, because again, it's not in my experience at all the monsters that have been described. In fact, I'm married to a Purdue graduate. I have many family members that are Purdue graduates. They were all Purdue students. I'm friends with many Purdue students. I go to church with them. They're interns in our company. They're some of the finest individuals that I know. And I think that the quality of Purdue students is only going to go up as the quality of the Purdue's education is increasing here in the coming years through the leadership of Mitch Daniels. So one other point on that is this isn't also going to be a random selection of Purdue students. This is going to be a high-end development. We are competing for top rents. And so this will be a resident that is willing to pay for a nice development. They're willing to pay to live somewhere nice. And they're also someone who doesn't want to live next to the bar. They don't want to be by the partying. What they want is something a little nicer. Maybe they have a dog that they want to walk. Maybe they want a little bit more space. That's the resident that we are targeting. And so, yeah, while there's fears of crime and partying and all the things, in our experience, that's not our resident base. And so,
if you don't mind, I'd like to speak to just a couple of data points, and hopefully shed a little bit of light and provide some context. So there were some discussions about the entrance for this development. I'm comfortable in stating that I would say an R1 single family home development is likely going to place their entrance in the location or very close to the exact location that this development would propose, for the reasons that some folks have discussed and the reasons that I conveyed that our engineering team evaluated. You evaluate the curve of the road, you evaluate the slope of the road, and the location that is shown would likely be a future R1 single family home entrance also. I believe it's very close to what's being currently used by the farmer who brings equipment out onto the road with his ventures. Additionally, as it relates to traffic, it's not really subjective. It's a data-based exercise. The traffic impact analysis is based on an ITE trip generation manual. So the information that was gathered by the engineers and discussed with NDOT is not up for a significant amount of debate. It goes by a textbook. So I feel that, you know, it is not a guesstimation. It is very much based on where it is headed with a discussion about a driveway permit. Also, someone brought up bike lanes, and I would say, or bike concerns. I would say that that issue exists with single family homes as much as, and if not more than, with a project of this nature. It's currently evidenced in the fact that this property is actually being crossed by folks in the surrounding neighborhoods as a point to connect to other properties and head toward cross the railroad tracks and head toward the PRF land. So the issue or concern associated with bikes clearly must be a concern of the community already. I don't know if this neighborhood project would in any way, shape, or form exacerbate that situation. So I don't know if that helps offer any clarity on a couple of those concerns that were raised by the group, but I'm happy to answer additional questions.
Thank you. Anything more as far as rebuttal from the petitioner?
No, thank you very much, and we'd be happy to respond to any comments or questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Teeter. Commission members, any questions, comments?
I'll add a couple comments. First of all, I want to compliment both the petitioner and the opposition for the way they have basically conducted their individual campaigns. I don't know that there's been any other issue in which I received more feedback on in regard to a single rezone. So I appreciate how it was handled. It was all done respectfully, and there's a lot to be said for that. Although I will support the commitments that have been offered tonight, because if the project ultimately is approved, those commitments are warranted. I just cannot support this project. And I kind of said it all along, even when I first heard about this project, you know, student housing west of 231 just does not feel right. And I know it can be said that there's some student projects that were put along Klondike and some on 52 west of 231, but I think we all know those projects are moving away from student housing, and student housing is not really working well there in those areas. It just, you know, to put it, this is a beautiful project. Don't get me wrong. It's an outstanding project, but as several people have mentioned tonight, this is just not the right area for it, especially right up against an R1 like this. So for those reasons, I just don't feel that I can support the project.
Is there any other commission members wishing to speak or make comment in regards to this?
Jackson, this is Larry Leverance. I would agree with Tom. My feeling is we worked hard on the corridor plan, and yes, this is not part of that plan, but I think it's still, we had a flavor for that plan that extends out, and it is. I agree with Tom. It is a beautiful project, but I just don't think it's the right spot for it. And I think if it was in a different spot, I certainly could support it, but I can't support it right where it is.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
It's Tracy Brown. Thank you. To my fellow commissioners, I'd like Commissioner Murtaugh. It's been a long time since I've had this much inbound traffic in my mailbox, and I appreciate everyone reaching out. And I've read each and every one of those from both sides of the issues. And I know people in the neighborhood and have known them for a long time. And I know the King family and the wonderful work that they've done in this community and beyond. But I am, I have to go back to my experience. And in my years with the sheriff's office, I was in a position to witness firsthand the types of calls generated in high density housing, including student housing. And even with the very best of management practices, and I'm sure we would get that from the King family and their partners, there's no hiding from the fact that it would impact those neighborhoods at some level. Surrounding land use patterns, the corridor plan, the comprehensive plan and testimony from our very own APC staff lead me to believe that this rezone just isn't appropriate for the area. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. Any other comments, questions from the commission members? Okay, with that, we will move to the vote. Mr. Burns, would you like to handle each one of the commitments separately? We have 3 items to vote on, 2 commitments, and then...
Jackson,
Yes, sir?
I have just a few social media summaries for you.
Please.
Yeah, just to follow up. We had one comment on YouTube, just informational, asking how many APC approved letters met the requirements to support the rezone and those against. I believe our final tally was 9 letters were submitted in favor of the rezone that had signatures, so they met the requirements of the bylaws. There were 61 without signatures, and so they did not pass the test. The letters with signatures received in opposition to the rezone and uploaded to the website were 98, and letters without signatures in opposition were 16. So those are the actual letters. That does not include all of the petition numbers that have already been described. So that's a response to that individual. On Facebook, again, we've gotten a lot more comments on Facebook. I've been sort of trying to parse the ones that we've already sort of had responses, or the issues that they brought up have already been covered in the from the opposition speakers, so we're not apt to repeat things people have already said. But there is a handful here that have not been mentioned. A couple comments came in asking about noise pollution. I know we've had some issues with comments on light pollution, and they have a commitment to address that issue, but there was a question about how noise pollution would be mitigated. Also, there's concern about a few comments on city bus, that if there was if the bus were to stop here, obviously likely the inbound side would be on the other side of the street, and there were some concerns about individuals crossing 26 to get to a potential bus stop. And so just some transit concerns there in the event that city bus were to place stops in this project's vicinity. There were some other comments concerning railroad safety. The railroad does bound this property to the east, and there were some comments about people perhaps using the railroad right of way as a path. And I guess the question probably is, what would be how would that safety issue be addressed, perhaps? And then finally, there's a comment about what are the rents being expected for this complex. No kind of follow up about what that mean, what they mean behind that, but just it seems to be sort of an open question. Let's see, we have another question about the drainage for the site, and I can answer that through the subdivision process, they would have to go before the county drainage board for approval. And so that the project would be scrutinized to make sure it complies with state and local ordinance for concerning drainage. So like I said, we're getting a steady stream of commentary through Facebook, but these are sort of some of the relevant comments that I don't think have yet been brought up.
Well, thank you for bringing those up. I think at this point in time, because I believe we've closed citizens' comments, but because we've brought these up, whether in favor or opposite, I think we owe Mr. Teeter a chance to respond, to rebuttal to these particular comments if he should so choose. But any further comments going forward on Facebook or so, that platform, I believe, Mr. Burns, if you're in agreement, that platform has been closed.
I agree. Public comments are now terminated.
Thank you. Mr. Teeter?
Yes, I guess I'd ask Linda to make a comment at this point. I think she had another one to make.
Well, I just, the two things that came off that social media, I heard something about the bus stop and, possible concerns with the railroad. Kind of going back to what we have already observed out there is there's a pattern by the adjacent associations of already using the property to cut across the railroad. I would suggest that we probably wouldn't make that situation any worse than it exists today. And frankly, I think that there could be some solutions presented to prevent that in the form of fencing and any other means that the planning department and other folks felt would be a good idea to eliminate that as a risk. And then additionally, the bus stop, as we communicated, bus shuttles are our primary form of transportation for our folks. The bus stop is absolutely a plus, and if it was a positive and well received, we could certainly work to achieve a safe location for that across from our property. But it currently exists across the street from, I believe, the Orchards entrance at this time, or very nearby. So the same concern that folks might have about our resident, I would say probably already exists today out there on 26. So I hope that folks wouldn't see this as really making it worse than a condition that maybe already is a challenge to the community at this time.
Thank you, Eric. I just would make a couple of comments quickly. Again, to just reiterate that the R1 does not ensure owner-occupied housing. Again, with the proximity to Purdue, if single-family housing does come in, to me, it's going to be potentially could be student rental housing. The other comment I would make is to go back to Happy Hollow, which to me is one of the finest neighborhoods in West Lafayette. And we've got apartment buildings in there that have been there for 30 years or 40 years. We've got new apartment buildings. We got $1 million homes. We got a new subdivision coming in there with $300,000 to $500,000 homes. It has not had any detrimental effect on the value of property. And I think it has had very little effect on the crime for that particular area. I think the same would hold true for us. With that, I would respectfully request that you give us a favorable recommendation, and thank you for your attendance.
Thank you, Ms. Irving and Mr. Teeter. Commission members, any final comments, questions? Okay, Mr. Burns, now I believe we can move to, we have 3 separate votes. The first 2 will be for commitments, and the third will be for the rezone.
That is correct. The first vote would be on the first commitment. The commitments, as you know, are found at page 2 of the staff report. The first commitment that I'm about to ask for your vote on pertains to real estate 1, that is the R1 commitment. And so when I call your name, please signify your vote for that first commitment by saying approve or deny. Jackson Bogan.
Approve.
Larry Leverins.
Approve.
Roland Winger.
Approve.
Gary Schroeder.
Approve.
Jerry Reynolds.
Approved.
Greg Jones.
Approved.
Diana Looper. Diana Looper. I don't hear from her. If anyone hears from her, sees indication, let me know. Vicky Pearl.
Approve.
Michelle Dennis.
Approve.
Tom Murtaugh.
Approve.
Perry Brown.
Approve.
Tracy Brown.
Approve.
Jason Domkowski. Jason Domkowski.
He had to board his flight, Mr. Burns.
All right. Lisa Dullum.
Approve.
Kathy Parker.
Approve.
Carla Snodgrass.
Approve.
I show 14 in favor of commitment number 1, with Diana Looper and Jason Domkowski not voting and Jake Gray absent. Real estate commitment 2 pertains to the same page in the staff report. That is page 2. It is real estate Roman 2, and it pertains to the R3 development. There are 3 commitments that you'll see in the materials. When I call your name, please signify your vote for this second commitment by saying approve or deny. Jackson Bogan.
Approve.
Larry Leverins.
Approve.
Roland Winger.
Approve.
Gary Schroeder.
Approve.
Jerry Reynolds.
Approved.
Greg Jones.
Approved.
Diana Looper. Diana Looper. Vicky Pearl.
Approved.
Michelle Dennis.
Approved. And I believe Diana is giving a thumbs up.
Okay, do you see Diana giving a thumbs up? I will
Yeah.
give an approved to Diana. Tom Murtaugh.
Approve.
Perry Brown.
Approve.
Tracy Brown.
Approve.
Jason Domkowski. Jason Domkowski. Lisa Dullum.
Approve.
Kathy Parker.
Approve.
Carla Snodgrass.
Approve.
I show 15 in favor of commitment number 2. The final vote that I'll ask you on pertaining to this issue is the rezone itself. So when I call your name, please signify your vote for rezone by saying approve or deny. Jackson Bogan.
Deny.
Larry Leverins.
Deny.
Roland Winger.
Deny.
Gary Schroeder.
Deny.
Jerry Reynolds.
Denied.
Greg Jones.
Denied.
Diana Looper.
Denied.
Vicky Pearl.
Denied.
Michelle Dennis.
Deny.
Tom Murtaugh.
Deny.
Perry Brown.
Deny.
Tracy Brown.
Denied.
Jason Domkowski. Jason Domkowski. Lisa Dullum.
Deny.
Kathy Parker.
Deny.
I make that 15 denials for the rezone.
Thank you. Don, please tally those and reach out to those members should we miss any there. On to administrative matters, which we have none. We will now move to the approval of the March Executive Committee agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I still cannot get my written vote to
Thank you.
Okay, I move the following request for subdivisions be placed on the March 3rd, 2021 Area Plan Commission Executive Committee agenda. Petitioner's request placement thereon be without reference to compliance or noncompliance with the adopted subdivision ordinance. That would be RE 0078, South Tippy Rural Estate Subdivision, Rural Estate Preliminary Plat.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? That carries. Determination of variances.
I move that the following request for variance from the Unified Zone Ordinance is not a request for use variance prohibited from consideration by ordinance and statute. That's BZA 2049, Purdue Christian Campus House.
I second.
Motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? That carries.
I move that the science section of the UCO be strictly adhered to regarding BZA 2049, Purdue Christian Campus House.
I second.
Motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? That carries. Sally, your director's report?
Just two things to comment on. The first of all, I need to make a correction and beg an apology for Maureen, because Maureen was the one who worked with Kathy on the maps in the year-end building permit report. And I just would like you to take a few minutes and look over that report, because there's a lot of really good information in it, not just about where building permits are occurring, but also where our subdivision activity is occurring, and then the really nice maps that show building permits by specific development. So that's it.
Thank you, Sally. We'll now pause for that minute for citizens' comments and grievances.
Hey, Jackson, it's Vicki Pearl. Can I ask a question, Sally?
Certainly.
Certainly.
Is there going to be any study done on all the new projects that are coming online between downtown, going up the Main Street, Lafayette corridor, on sustainability or a moratorium?
I guess what I would say is there hasn't appeared to me, at least, a need for a study, because those are all in accordance with what we would like to see, which is to make better use of expensive real estate and get rid of parking garages, or I'm sorry, get rid of surface parking in favor of infill development. I think we have a better chance of getting a grocery store downtown the more people we have living there. So if you could maybe illuminate a little more on your concerns, we could
Well, I
maybe
guess
give you
I
a
just
hand.
know that I'm happy with everything that's been approved, but the question becomes, is it gonna, is more that if there's more presented, which I know of a project that's in working phases now, at what point? Well, I don't know. I guess I'm trying to say, when we looked at campus there for a while, we said, okay, we want to step back and see if, based on all the projects that were approved, are these going to fill up? And I guess that's where I'm going with this. It's like on this side of the river, you know, we've got a lot coming. We've got lots that have been approved and are going to start to build. And is there going to be the capacity to fill all those, or are we going to start to overbuild if we're, you know, as more projects get approved?
Well, what we do know is that these downtown areas are included in the rental report every year. The other thing we know is that in some of these census tracts, historically the vacancy has been a little higher. Vacancies in apartments are lower in suburban areas in Lafayette, which is the opposite phenomenon that we have in West Lafayette. So the answer, I guess, to your question is they will be included in the rental report every year, because that area is always included.
And I can add to that. The internal data that we look at when we do our, particularly our landlord surveys, really points to a phenomenon in the core areas of Lafayette where new stock comes in, it's highly desirable. It's the older stock that has not been reinvested in that is largely the cause for the vacancies. And so as redevelopment occurs in undesirable stock on land that undesirable stock currently exists in Lafayette, that new stock that comes in is highly desirable, and it's reflected in the vacancy rates that we've seen over the years. And so that's a fairly established trend that we've seen in Lafayette, and I don't see it stopping.
Thank you.
Okay. With that, Ryan, have we received anything in regards to grievances and such?
No further comment beyond the Trinitas rezone.
Okay. Well, Mr. Hiddle, thank you for joining us this evening. You got to see a unique one for sure, and appreciate you being here. Looking forward to seeing you in person the 1st, right? Am I correct on that?
That's correct. And thank you for having me.
Wonderful. All, thank you for your patience tonight. Appreciate everything. Staff, great job as always. Look forward to seeing you all in person, but hey, until then, peace. Have a cold
Thank you,
one.
Jackson.
See ya.
Night.
I will move to adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Schroeder.